Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG and welcome to another Commander deck check. We have a fun one for you today. We're going to be looking at the big, the bad, Atraxa Grand Unifier. It is 3 green, white, blue and a black for a 7/7 legendary creature Phyrexian Angel. It has Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, Lifelink, and when Atraxa enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each card type, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. I'll be honest, this is one hell of a strong card and a fantastic commander. The 4 colours lead to so much flexibility in terms of building it as a commander deck. So the question is, how are we going to build it today? Well, we're going to be building Atraxa as a Phyrexian tribal deck with a poison subtheme. Why are we doing this? Well, firstly, with Phyrexia All Be One, there is a ton of new and cool Phyrexians for us to play with. Also, with the recent subtype update, a load of creatures that weren't Phyrexians are now Phyrexians, so we currently have 344 creatures for us to choose from. That is definitely one of the benefits of Atraxa being a 4-colour commander. The other benefit of making it a tribal deck is that we can top up the deck with some powerful tribal matters cards to help things like our card draw, our ramp, and also winning the game. The poison subtheme is because Phyrexians are dripping with that black ichor, and there are plenty of ways that we can get value out of it. And importantly, weaponize it as a bonus win condition, as 10 poison counters is a lot less than 40 life points. We will have dedicated tribal and poison sections, but there will be Phyrexians and cards that work with poison, like effects with Proliferate, all over this deck, so do keep an eye out for them.
One quick note about this video is that we will be going through all the individual sections that you need to make the deck yourself. We won't be giving a full deck list, rather a number of cards that you need in each section to make it work, and then a list of cards for you to pick from. Any card we mention will be down in the description below.
Okay, let's first go over our Tribal Matters section. These are cards that will help tie the whole deck together. Firstly, we have some cost reducers, with cards like Herald, which can also give us a nice bit of card advantage, and then Urza's Incubator to knock 2 generic off the cost of most of our deck. Then we have cards like Skrelv's Hive and Phyrexian Swarmlord. These can both make us a bucket load of Phyrexian tokens. Yes, the Swarmlord has been errated, which all importantly dish out poison counters to our opponents. Another thing those Phyrexian tokens can be used for is tapping to Cryptic Gateway to slam down some more expensive Phyrexians. Like for example, some of the big Praetors that we'll be getting to a little bit later on. We then also have Reflections of Littjara, which doubles up every Phyrexian spell that we cast. Fantastically, this will double up our commander, and while one will die to the legend rule, we'll still get its enter the battlefield effect, effectively meaning Atraxa will trigger twice. Then you have a card like Vanquisher's Banner, which is a little bit of everything in a tribal deck. It buffs up the team and draws us cards when we cast spells of the chosen tribe, a really solid card in this deck. Next up we have some Poison Matters cards. Like with the last section, there will be plenty of other cards in this deck that care about poison counters or interact with them in some way. But those cards will all do other things. This section is here as a base so we can really get that poison counter win. With something like Poison, the first counter we can give to a player is by far the most important one. That is why Ichor Rats is the best at this. It has Infect itself, but most importantly it just gives every player a poison counter when it comes into play. Then we have some cards that will give opponents poison counters by being really difficult to block. We have cards like Inkmoth Nexus, Bilious Skulldweller, Blighted Agent, Pestilent Syphoner and Voidwing Hybrid. These are fantastic at getting the first poison counter onto an opponent, and they can chip in for more poison over the course of a game. Remember as well that all of these have been errated to also be Phyrexians. The reason I'm stressing about that first poison counter is because once an opponent has one, we can do things like proliferate those counters so we can tick them up that way as well. Yes, your Thrummingbird and your Bloated Contaminator need to get through for damage themselves to do this, but one's a flyer and one's a 4/4 with trample for 3. Cards like Evolution Sage, Tainted Observer, and Inexorable Tide are the scary ones for our opponents, as they will proliferate those poison counters just as we go about playing Magic, like with Evolution Sage whenever we play a land, or with creatures coming in with Tainted Observer, or just by casting any spell whatsoever with Inexorable Tide. That Proliferate also works really well with Planeswalkers, like for example, Ajani Sleeper Agent. This has some card draw, it can put counters on our creatures which we can then proliferate up as well, and then its ultimate gives us an emblem that also gives an opponent more poison counters, which is exactly what we're after. You then also have a card like Norn's Decree. The top part gives an opponent a poison counter when they deal combat damage to us, but it also draws people cards whenever they attack a player with a poison counter. As we're the deck dishing them out, it means players are less likely to attack us, which we love. Then we have Vishgraz the Doomhive, a great beta that makes us 3 toxic mites, and then gets buffed up into quite a scary creature for the amount of poison that our opponents have. Next, we're looking at Contaminant Grafter. This is a little bit of everything that the deck wants. It has Trample and Toxic, which we like, it can proliferate poison counters, that we love, and then also can draw us cards and ramp us if one of our opponents has 3 or more poison counters on them. An immense amount of value for a 5/5 body. Next up, we have some card draw. Like with most decks, we're going to want between 8 to 10 bits here. In this video, I'm mainly going to be going over synergistic options, but you can run some more standard bits like your Heuristic Studies or your Phyrexian Arena. First up, we have spells that draw us cards while either proliferating poison counters up or dishing them out. I really like these in the deck. Yes, they are generally 1 more mana than the other versions of these effects, but just having more proliferate in the deck will really add up to some poison kills way quicker than your opponents will be expecting. With all that proliferate, we have Augury, Stalker of Spheres, to go with it. Perfect at really taking advantage of everything that the deck is already doing. Once we've got those poison counters a little higher, we have Distorted Curiosity. In this deck, this is effectively 1 mana to draw 2 cards. That is always going to be very good. We then have Vraska Betrayal Sting. This could really go in a number of different sections here. It could be interaction with that -2, or a win condition with that ultimate. But at its base level, that 0 to draw a card, lose a life, and also proliferate will just do so much work in the deck that it makes Vraska seem like a slam dunk. Then we have Ixhel, Scion of Atraxa, a flying vigilance toxic 2 that comes with the bonus that for each opponent who has 3 or more poison counters, we get to play cards on the top of our opponent's decks. While this isn't straight card draw, it definitely is card advantage. Another group of cards that aren't strictly card draw, but again are card advantage, is some flicker spells. I don't think we want too many in this build, but this deck has plenty of good enter the battlefield effects going around, like for example Ichor Rats. But this also importantly includes our Commander, which draws us a bunch of cards when it comes into play. If we can start blinking Atraxa in the mid to late game, we will be drowning in card advantage that will really push this deck over the edge. Because these cards get better after Atraxa is already down, I wouldn't want to run these on top of my minimum 8 bits of card draw. These can be your bits 9 to 10, as we still need the deck to function. And then finally, we are a Phyrexian Matters deck after all. Let's get big and splashy with Jingataxius Core Augur. Drawing us 7 cards on our end step is always immense, and then nerfing our opponent's hands, they might not love, but we certainly will. Next up is our ramp section. Our commander does cost 7 mana, and as you've seen, we want to run some chunky other praetors as well. So in this build, I would be looking to run at least 10 bits here to be safe. Starting off with some synergistic options first, and we have Expand the Sphere. This digs us 6 cards deep into our deck and lets us get 2 lands and put them into play. If we do whiff at all, the difference is made up by proliferating. Again, absolutely fantastic. Then we have Mere Convert and Plague Mere, perfectly fine mana dorks that come with either Toxic or Infect, perfect for adding a bit more density to the deck. After that, we have our Rampant Growth style effects. These go through the deck and put lands into play. Ideally here, we'd be running Farseek, Nature's Law, 3 Visits, and Skyshroud Claim. As importantly, they can go and get non-basic lands out of the deck, so we can get any duels or triumphs that we might be running. Versions that don't do this are still perfectly fine in the deck, but these just give the added level of consistency that you'd want in a 4-colour build. We then have Glistening Sphere, a solid mana rock that although it does enter the battlefield tapped, proliferates when it comes in, then the next turn fixes all of our colours of mana, and then if an opponent is corrupted, that's the 3 or more poison counters thing, adds 3 mana of any one colour instead. Perfect for casting Atraxa all the earlier. We then have some more standard mana rocks with things like Arcane Signet, which taps for all of our colours, and then Chromatic Lantern, which makes all of our lands into command towers. Then lastly, we have Vorinclex Voice of Hunger. Like Jingataxius in our card draw section, we'll love double mana, while our opponents will hate their lands not untapping. All of this on a 7/6 trample body. Next up, we have our interaction section. Being in 4 colours means that we have a huge selection to choose from. Firstly, we have a card like Drown in Ichor. While it's not the most efficient, it will still have a target or 2, and the additional proliferate here is really nice. And while Vraska's Fall is an edict effect, which really does have their downside in Commander, just giving each opponent that poison counter, as we've said, is so important that for me it does have a place. For some synergistic board wipes, we have Phyresis Outbreak that gives each opponent a poison counter, which we love, and then gives all of their creatures -1/-1 for each poison counter that they have. Worst case, this just takes out a token player, but then mid to late game, this could also just be a one-sided board wipe, which is very hard to ignore. 2 more synergistic options now, with Phyrexian Rebirth, which makes 1 huge Phyrexian, and White Sun's Twilight, which makes a bunch of little Phyrexians. For some artifact or enchantment removal, we have Cankerbloom and Verdidian Corruptor. Great at adding to that Phyrexian count, while also being solid answers. You can then top up this section with the greatest and best bits of targeted removal and board wipes that these colours have available to them. Really, you can just run the best 8 bits that you have here and you will be set. Next up is a little bit of protection. Our commander does cost 7 mana, and we have a lot of key cards that we really want to help out the deck, so we want to run some protection to help us keep those around. First up is Venerated Rot Priest, which while this doesn't stop a player targeting a creature we control with a kill spell, it does at least punish them for it by giving them that all-important poison counter. Next we have Skrelv Defect to Might. This can give a creature we control hexproof from the colour of a removal spell until end of turn, which is obviously very nice. Also importantly, it can make a creature we control not be blocked by a creature of the colour that we have chosen. Fantastic if we ever want to push some damage through with Atraxa. Then we have Necrogen Communion. This returns the enchanted creature back into play if it's ever removed, while also giving it Toxic too. This is fantastic for putting onto Atraxa, so that if it ever does get removed, we'll get that lovely enter the battlefield effect all over again. And then because obviously we have Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots, always solid at protecting an important commander or a key praetor that we want to stick around. Moving on, we have some Recursion, another great way of making sure our key bits are always available to us. First up we have Unnatural Restoration, a great way of bringing a key permanent back to our hand for just 2 mana, while also giving us that bonus proliferate that we love. Then we have Gliss's Retriever, another great hasty beater with Toxic 3, that if it dies we can exile it to bring back a number of cards equal to the opponents that have 3 or more poison counters on them. And then we obviously have Shieldred Whispering One, another beefy praetor that can bring back a creature from our graveyard, while also making an opponent sack a creature on each of their turns. Let's move on to some dedicated win conditions now, and we have some really cool options to close out a game. First up, we have some extra praetors. These are all just fantastic in the deck. Shieldred the Apocalypse just gives us so much value over the course of the game. Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines, doubles up our ETB effects, including Atraxa, while also stopping our opponents. Vorinclex Monstrous Raider doubles up counters on things, including our Planeswalkers, and then big Elesh Norn Grand Cenobite shrinks down our opponent's boards while making ours massive. I am aware that unfortunately these are also probably the most expensive cards that we've mentioned so far. If you have them, fantastic, stick them in. If you don't, that is fine, we have plenty of other cool ways of winning a game. For example, we have ways of putting counters onto our Phyrexian Swarm to buff them up. You have cards like Broker's Ascendancy, Good Fortune Unicorn, and Cathar's Crusade, which are all fantastic options here. Remember as well that once we have a counter on each of these creatures, whenever we proliferate, those counters also get added to. So it's nice to see everything is synergizing together. Then we have cards that pump everything's power for a turn, while also increasing the poison damage that we're dishing out. If we cast Triumph of the Hordes with any kind of board state, we should probably be winning the game on the spot. +1/+1, Trample and Infect is a hell of a combination. Noxious Assault is Triumph of the Hordes at home, but I think in this deck, where players will already have a bunch of poison counters on them, we will be in the position where they'll be dead if they block or not. So for that reason, I think it is a solid include and a very nice budget option. And then, because our commander is a 7/7 Flying Vigilance Death-Touch lifelink, we have Grafted Exoskeleton to add Infect into the mix. By the time Atraxa comes down and we get this equipped, it's likely an opponent will already have a couple of poison counters on them, meaning this could turn Atraxa into a one-hit death machine. Rounding off the deck with some utility lands, and I will be honest, we can't run too many as we are a 4-colour deck. Khan's Bastion seems like a solid place to start, for just some extra proliferation in the deck. Then we have cards like Path of Ancestry, Secluded Courtyard, and Unclaimed Territory, which all become rainbow lands for our Phyrexians, which are really solid includes. So that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you all very much for watching. Do make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and let me know down in the comments if there's any other commanders from recent sets that you would like to see a deck take on, and I'll check them out. But until next time, I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.